Oh, there's Gilly.
I made it.
Hey, there's Kevin.
Hey,
Okay, you're recording, Dan. Great. Perfect.
All right. So call the meeting to order 7:01 according to my computer. And I have did Joe Bertrand just come on?
He did.
Yep.
All right.
And Bill Boudry as well.
And Bill. Okay, so the only people I think I'm missing are Doug, Stefan, and Gerard.
Correct. Here comes Stefan right now.
Oh,
Yep.
Stefan's coming on. And so now it's Doug and Gerard.
Correct.
And I just got a text message from Gerard. I'll be on in a few minutes, 3 concurrent Zoom calls in my house I'm setting up. Only 3?
Yeah.
All right,
Well, I have 2 in
I'll
mind,
respond to her.
but there's only 2 of us.
All right, so that means just Doug is the only one missing, and Gerard will show up when he gets there.
Okay.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started? The first thing is the public participation. And Mr. Mayo, did anybody come in?
Nobody came in that I received, and this meeting was posted with the ability of people to call in. I don't see that anybody did. Maybe you want to call Mr. Chairman and ask if anybody did. Is on the line, because I don't see it.
Anybody out there want a public comment? Hearing none. Let's move on. Next order is the approval of the minutes. My apologies for this afternoon's late sending of a slightly adjusted minutes from a week ago. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a quick look at them. The only changes I made was to expand at a couple of budgets in terms of a sentence referring to the percentage increase in that budget from 2020. And Stefan was good enough to notice I had 2022 in one spot instead of 2021. So I fixed that. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from last week.
I'll make a motion, Dan, to approve the minutes from last week.
That was
Second.
whom? Who motioned?
Sully.
That was me, Jim Sullivan, I think.
And the second was
Don?
Don. Beautiful. Any other discussion? Seeing none, what I'll do is like I did the last time, if anybody wants to abstain or object to the minutes, put your hand up. Otherwise, everybody who's on the call will be assumed to vote in the affirmative. I don't see any hands, so I guess we're good on the minutes. I'll declare those approved. Second item is articles for review, the public safety building. So who's going to go first?
If Chief Scory can share his PowerPoint.
I'm going to do my best here.
This is a great test of his skills. Let's see if this happens.
No, I practice this all day. Let's hope it works. Can everybody see that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well done.
Well done.
How about that?
We knew you weren't just another pretty face, Chief.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. All right, so this is the same PowerPoint presentation that we brought to Town Council on March 9th. So I'll start moving along here and maybe trying to page down. Not working. All right, I was doing good for a second there.
Yeah, down the lower right, there's 2 arrows, left and right. Way to bottom of your screen on the right. You see the arrows? You're getting close.
There you
There we go. I was trying to use
There
the
you go.
tab piece. All right.
Try that.
There we go. All right.
All right.
So here we have the list of members of the reassessment committee. So in the top left is the picture of the building in 1950 when it was completed. And at that time, the department was made up of 34 officers and 1 civilian employee. And what you see on the bottom right is what the building looks like now. And it's really not much different other than the new roof line and the addition on the back. And here we are in 2020 with 47 officers, 1 support staff, 1 mental health clinician, 1 recovery coach, 1 respond advocate, and 2 parking enforcement officers. So obviously we have many more people working in the building that was built for 34 officers and 1 civilian. So the existing structure is on the left and is a 70-year-old building. The fire side is a 17-year-old building and is bumped out to the sidewalk, whereas the front of the police station is not. So you have some room to work with there. What you see here is the addition that was added to the back of the building in 2003. And what that houses is the detention area, the sally port, and the utility rooms, which will be made up of the 911 room, the boiler, generator, electric room, IT room, 911, and the radio equipment room. Now, some of the problems we have here, there are water leaks in some of the ceilings over some of the electrical equipment. And we also have some temperature control issues in these rooms. The crucial rooms being the 911 room and the IT room, we've had to add some air conditioning to those rooms and some alarm lights down in dispatch, just so that the officers down there know that if the air conditioning fails and the rooms start to overheat, they can go up and open the doors. So an independent study was done in 2017, and what that found was that the police department building is undersized. The front lobby area has accessibility and safety issues. Water leaks create critical risk to the 911 system and IT equipment. There are environmental issues. The evidence storage room, which is on the 3rd floor, is not located in a proper area and is undersized. And the overall layout is not conducive to our best practices. And the analysis determined that the most efficient and cost-effective way to add usable space would be through structurally independent horizontal additions adjacent to the existing building. I can't see, hold on one second here. Hold on one second. So the lobby is not user-friendly. We have put up many wayfinding signs just to help the public navigate the lobby. The police records officers constantly conducting walk-ins to the fire department, and the lobby is only manned during regular business hours during the week. When citizens come in, when there's nobody in records, if they need immediate help, they have to pick up the phone that's on the wall. Believe it or not, it's quite difficult for people to find this phone. We've watched them on camera walk around the lobby and then had to get on the intercom to tell them where it is, even though we've put up countless signs to help people find the phone. This says the existing police first level. What this is actually the basement of the building. And the basement houses the locker rooms, which have unusable lockers due to support columns. And both the male and female locker rooms are nearly at capacity. If you look at the picture all the way on the left, that's the clinician's office. That was formerly a storage closet that we converted into an office. There's no heat in there, there's no air conditioning, and obviously you can see that there's no windows and there's a very limited amount of space. That office is 5 feet wide. The middle picture is the family services office. That's where Officer Randall works out of. Again, that was a storage closet for the armorer, and we had to convert that into an office for Amy. And then the picture on the right is the water room off of the garage where we store all the canine equipment. The roll call room, which is not pictured here, is also far too small for daily briefings, and it's so small that we can't actually hold any training in there. Bicycles and other equipment are stored in hallways. Recovered property room is unusable because items become filthy. Some items are stored on blocks due to water damage. And some people have asked why we can't store equipment off-site, and the answer to that is it's just too difficult to access. You see the bicycles in the top left. There used to be a bicycle room off the Sally Port. And when we made the offices in the basement, we had to relocate all that equipment. So what was the bicycle room became the armor's office. The picture on the top right is what was supposed to be the property storage recovery room. And all that is a cage in the parking garage. And because of the amount of dirt that gets tracked into the garage, anything we put in there becomes filthy and could become damaged. And bottom left is just a picture of that caged area. And then the bottom right, that's the storage area off of the garage. The Sally Port, the prisoner bay, has some safety issues. It's too small. If you look at the back of the van, you can see that it's backed right up to the back wall. And when you look at the front of the van, you can see that the door basically comes down to the front of the van. So the van has 2 compartments on it. There's one in the side and there's one in the back. If we have to transport both a male and a female prisoner, we have to utilize both of those compartments. So to put somebody in the back of the van, we have to actually open the Sally Port door, pull the van out about 4 or 5 feet, and then put the prisoner in the back. So there's some obvious safety issues there. We've looked into purchasing a smaller van, and the bottom line is they just don't make a smaller van that's outfitted for prisoners. The bottom right picture, you can see a support beam that's on the left door area of the Sally Port. So when a cruiser pulls in the garage, because of that beam, they have to pull in at an angle. Makes it more difficult to get the prisoner out of the car and into the booking area. And then the bottom left picture is what was once the bicycle storage room is now the armorer's office, and that's right off of the Sally Port. So here we have the proposed addition, and the top is obviously the front of the building, the bottom is the rear of the building. So the front of the police side would be bumped out to match the fire, and the new entry would provide a nice flow of foot traffic for citizens to access police and fire representatives inside the building. And when you look at the bottom photo, you'll notice that the Sally Port has been bumped out, allows more space inside the Sally Port so that we don't have to open the door when loading prisoners into the van. The new dispatch center location will be in the lobby and will allow 24-hour access for citizens. Bottom line is the addition would create a facility that accommodates both present and future departments. This is the first floor plan. This includes what is the now basement area, and then also the lobby, dispatch. So when we went through this and tried to identify how this grows and allows us to grow for the future, Joe, chime in here whenever you want. We sat down and we looked at the plans and we said, all right, so what does this give us now? How does this meet our needs, and how does it meet our needs in the future? So when you look at dispatch, I'll start there, which is on your the right-hand side. We highlighted any areas that allow for future growth in blue and outlined them in yellow dots. So we currently have 2 officers that work dispatch, and you'll see here that this adds a 3rd dispatch station. But most importantly, it puts dispatch in the lobby, and it's in a direct line of view with the door and the vestibule. So when anybody walks into the station, they'll always be able to see an officer right there at the dispatch window. And that's extremely important. We've missed that for years. We haven't had that. And it's been a real challenge for some people that come into our station looking for help. The records office has an extra workstation in case we need to add an extra person there. And when you look at general evidence, that evidence area takes up what would be the bottom of the addition. And it's probably twice as big, if not bigger, of what we already have for evidence. Our current evidence room is pretty much maxed out. It's busting at the seams. There's really no space left in there. So that gives us a tremendous amount of space for evidence, but just as important, it's right near records. Right now, records has to go all the way from the lobby up to the 3rd floor to log evidence, bring it back down, prepare it for court. This puts everything on the same level. So the flow is much better. There's going to be a new locker room, which we've identified as the women's locker room. The locker room that they're currently in only has 8 lockers, and they're relatively small. We have 4 female officers right now, and we're in the process of hiring a 5th. So with the 5th officer and the current configuration of the lockers in the women's room, it's going to be cramped in there. So we built them a bigger locker room, And then there's a future locker room for overflow from the men's locker room, because the men's locker room is pretty much tapped out right now for space. So that's where we get the additional space from in the first floor. We move to the second floor. You'll see that on the top of the picture, the top of the diagram, the bump out of the sally port to give more space. And what we've also done is we've eliminated one of the male cells to make more storage space off of the sally port. We've never, to my knowledge, maxed out all of the male cells that we have. And we have the ability now to send prisoners to the Middlesex Sheriff for safekeep as well. So we were able to sacrifice one of those holding cells. There's a better flow here for personnel. We've moved detectives from the third floor down to the second floor. If you look at the bottom of the diagram, you'll see space for 2 future detective positions. We've been able to put family services and the clinician all on the same floor with the detectives, and created an extra space for either family services or another clinician. And it's good to have them all on the same floor. That way they can share information quickly and they do work together. Roll call is on that floor. It adds more space. There's better flow here with the roll call, the lunchroom, bathrooms, and storage. We'll move along to the third floor. You'll see in the top of the screen, there's what's identified as 2 future offices. Those can either be used for office space or storage, whichever. There's another future office of storage in the middle. And there's a better flow here for the administrative staff. The deputy chief is next to the chief's office. We have a conference room, which allows us to sit more people than we can do now in a small conference room that we have. The conference room we have now, we can't even hold staff meetings in there. There's not enough space. There's not enough seats. This would allow us to do that. There's an extra seat for a support staff personnel. And there's a future office space next to the evening lieutenant, which could either be for another administrative staff or a future lieutenant. So we've identified quite a bit of future space here to allow us to grow. The project benefits: dispatch moves to the lobby along with the records division to make the public safety building more user-friendly for our customers. There will be immediate access to an officer in an emergency. Privacy concerns for sensitive cases would be alleviated. The layout of the building would be reconfigured to better serve the officers and utilize best practices. Prisoner security in the sally port would be upgraded, and system upgrades would protect our critical infrastructure. How does it allow for growth in the future? The total current area of the police side of the public safety building is 20,529 square feet. When you take away the space of the lobby and the community room and the garage, the support rooms, which include the generator, boiler, 911 electric, radio, IT, the elevator, and the janitor staff, that takes away quite a bit of square space, which leaves us right around 8,000 square feet. This proposed project would increase the amount of usable space by 40%. The increase in usable space meets our current needs, allows for future growth. It will allow for the police force to grow with the community and create space for additional support personnel. This is something that we found in the little cutout from the 1949 Wakefield Annual Town Report when the police station was originally being built. And the quote that we took out of this was, "This building should be large enough to house the department for the next 20 or 25 years." So here we are 70 years later, and we have certainly outgrown it. It no longer meets our needs. So we hope we have your support in moving forward in this project. Thank you.
All right, Steve, who's up next to talk about this project?
I can do the reassessment committee report unless you wanted to take questions on that one first, however you wanted to do it.
Why don't we go all the way through and then we'll go back for questions.
Okay. All right, let's see how I can do this then. Okay. You guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, so as everyone may know, the the town council set up a public safety building reassessment committee. And that committee met for, the better part of a year to really talk about this project and to see, what we could do going forward, and try to look at all of the issues that were presented by people that frankly talked about it and ended up voting it down. So we ended up really going through and adding residents at large, members of Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, Wake Up, which is a Unified Prevention Coalition on Substance Abuse, members of the Permanent Building Committee, members of the Finance Committee. I believe the Finance Committee members were Jim Sullivan and Joanne Riley and Joe Bertrand, of course. Members of the Board of Health, the Chief and the Deputy Chief, the Chief of the Fire Department, our Emergency Management Director, our Public Work Director, myself, and was chaired by Town Council Chair Dombrowski. So I think the chief already went through this. So in 1950, we had 34 officers and 4,000 calls with the building, which was ostensibly, basically, pretty close to the same size. And in 2019, only, 47 officers and then close to 19,000 calls. So there's been a big change in the community and the types of calls that the police are taking. So the reassessment committee went back and engaged HKT Architect to assist in reevaluating the original proposal. And thanks to Joe Bertrand, I think there was a little bit of extra money in that account, and he got them to do it for basically nothing. So good job, Joe. But we also formed subcommittees to look and analyze all components of the project that we felt that people had questioned. We looked at potential sites for new buildings. We looked at funding sources, and basically, was there anything like the SBA for schools that would help us out? We looked at the priorities and functionality of the building, which the chief really spoke about. And we also talked about communication, how to better communicate what we looked at and what our plans are. So we looked at alternative sites. The question is, do we have any in town that we own? So we would probably have to buy one, and then we would build a building with a lot more infrastructure. We'd have to build another garage maybe. So we looked at that as that would probably be about $25 to $34 million all in when you include land acquisition and some of the other infrastructure and utilities. We could raise and rebuild on the current site, which that would be about $12 million, and that would not include, as I recall, and someone jump in if I'm wrong, the cost of relocating during that time. The current proposal is to kind of manage everybody in place for the most part. And we came back to expanding the current building, and that is in the $9.6 million range, which has increased a little bit since we last did this because of the cost of construction, what have you. Now, maybe with the economy going down, this might change, and maybe we'll get a little bit of reduction. I don't know, but that was at the time what we felt and HKT felt it would cost with the escalator clause in there. And we looked at alternative funding sources. I think I actually worked with Joanne Riley on this. Would love there to be an SBA for public safety buildings. And we actually, I actually spoke to State Representative Wong about this. And I had a scheme that maybe we could add something to the hotel and motel tax. You don't like the word scheme, someone said? I had an idea. Maybe we could add money to the hotel tax across the state and use that like they did to the sales tax. Add some money onto that, which covers the school buildings. And I think that years ago, maybe if things were different, maybe you might have thought that might be a good idea. But I think right now, certainly with the current status, it's not going to go anywhere, and maybe it wasn't going anywhere anyway. So again, we went through the priority, scope, and design, and I think that the chief went through all that. And really, what is amazing to me, and chief, jump in, is that maybe you said this would accommodate us for probably 60 officers.
I think it would, definitely, plus some personnel as well.
Yeah, so that is, I think that's a key point that was not maybe made clear to the public before. And we've done a lot in communication. We have a pretty robust page on our website. There's facts and questions. We did a bunch of video building tours and interviews with police leadership and some members of the community, citizens that really talked about the building. And I think we saw the Eldridges that did a great job. Amy Wall did a fantastic job. Jason Cohen on our permanent building committee did a great job going through that. And I think that we have the information out there. Before this this current situation happened, we were going to have a public session on this next week. Well, that's not going to happen now. We're going to have to reassess that and what we're going to do there with that. So the results were that with some tweaks to the design that the chief talked about, that this is the best plan that we can come up with. It'll increase the usable space for the police by 40%, and it would accommodate a staff of 60 or more in decades to come. And I liked in decades to come because I felt that Chief Scory might add to his police staff in one fiscal year. You should smile a little bit on that, Chief. In any event, the town meeting was going to be on May 4th. I think that will be changing. I expect the town council to move that to a later date, probably sometime in June for town meeting. But we felt that after looking at this and looking at the entire project, that this absolutely was the best way to go. The way that this would be financed, and I think this is something that the forecasting committee, we should look into it. When I looked at the bonding payments when I presented on the roads, I worked in the cost of the public safety building, so that would all come within 2.5. It would all be within our, basically what we're paying, what we're spending now on bonding. And what we did with the public safety building, or at least my idea was, working with bond counsel, was to kind of do it in 2 stages. And that, again, it depends on rates. If rates are really low, we might change that. But borrowing the design fees, authorizing the entire 9.6 million, borrowing the design fees in round 1, design and construction design fees, which would be around 2 million, and then putting the 7.6 million for construction in round 2 of borrowing. Although I would do it all in one article, we just stagger the borrowing. We would probably go through with some sort of a hybrid bonding program where we would defer some of the interest for a couple of years down the road. The reason being is that the fields at the high school are coming off soon as well, and this would really smooth out those payments. So what I would like to see us do is have a meeting of the forecasting committee so we can show how this all fits in. But for you number wonks, you're probably looking at in fiscal 23 about 350,000 on this building. Fiscal 24, 442. Fiscal 25, 442K. Fiscal 26 around 442K. Jumps up a little bit in 29 to 550, and then it will go. That'll carry that and then go down after that. So I think it works very well in conjunction with everything else. If you look at our sheet on all of our bonds that I think you guys have somewhere, we would still be adding to our available balance at the end of the day on it. However, we may want to tweak that a little bit given these current times, because maybe we can't afford to add so much to that available balance. That'll be something we'll be looking at over the next couple weeks with the forecasting committee to hopefully come up with a balanced budget.
Steve, it's Peter. Can I just ask you mentioned
Sure.
2023 350K, 2024 442, et cetera, and you're saying that would be incremental bond debt service?
That would be part of our debt service, but because remember, items are coming off.
Right.
All right. So we would still keep our payment from the tax levy for bonds the same through this entire period. If we do the roads and the public safety building and a couple of the other smaller issues, fire trucks and things like that. We have one that we'll go over with the and share with the whole town, with the whole finance committee, obviously, that shows if we went forward from fiscal year 22 to the future of dropping our bond payment to 2.65 million, which is a little bit less than we're talking about in fiscal year 21. However, I might look at adjust fiscal year 21 down a little bit, actually. We will not only pay for these projects, but start to increase our balance at the end of the day, that maybe in a few years, we could start to squeeze in a lot of a public DPW payment too. So it does, because of the way things fell off, like the Woodville comes off fiscal year 22. That's $530,000 that the town pays.
In debt service.
Debt service. The public safety building #1 falls off in fiscal year 20. Last payment is 22. The last payment is 22 on that one. That's $600,000. That comes off. So we're taking off $1 million worth of payments that the town's paying out. And then the recreation bond in fiscal year 28, if I'm looking across this, I don't have a ruler going, and Kevin makes this too small for my eyes to look at. That's about $485,000 a year. That's going to fall off. So this was a great program that we put together before my time. I think maybe Dan and Joe are the only two around that were on this, and it does work, and we'll share that with everyone. I think Dan has this. I'll show how it's going.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, the debt service fund, everybody has that. Just a reminder that if you want to speak, wait till I recognize you and raise your hand, so we can do that. I know that Evan's got some questions, but before we go to Evan, I wanted to give Joe and Joanne and Jim an opportunity to weigh in on their observations, thoughts, and concerns. So maybe we'll start with Joe.
Sure. As indicated, the reassessment committee met for about a year. What I was particularly involved in is with the chief and Jason Cohen from the permanent building committee, and we worked together with that HKT architects and essentially reconfigured it to show that the proposed plan has room for expansion, which we felt was one of the big issues that people had regarding this at town meeting, that there was no room for expansion. I think the chief showed clearly that there is room, and I think this is, and the other alternatives of $35 million for a new building just doesn't make sense. Doing some of the other things for 12 million and then buying new land or relocating them doesn't make sense. To me, this is the only option that makes perfect sense.
All right, thank you, Joe. Joanne or Jim, you were part of this committee. Anything you'd like to say?
So I worked primarily with Steve to see if there was money hidden under a rock someplace, and there wasn't. Didn't grow on trees either, but most of my time was spent working on the communication strategy, and which I think we came up with some pretty good communication vehicles so that the townspeople can better understand both the scope of the project, the reasons for it, the reasons that it's important, and then understand that it is our intent, from a financial perspective, that this is something that's covered within our budget, just like individuals would budget for other capital improvements in their home over a period of time, that this is something that the town needs to budget for, and that it doesn't fall into an override situation. So given some of the other priorities out there that the town has, I think that's an important piece of the message. And I guess if town meeting moves to June 4th, I would be hopeful and interested in seeing some opportunities for public presentations, just so that we can elicit some more support and open dialogue with the town over the the scope of the reassessment committee's work and all of the things that we exhausted in order to reconfirm that this is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Joanne. Jim, did you have anything to say, or are you good?
No, I'm basically good. Joanne hit on some of the key points. The only thing I would say, really, when you look at the three choices, it's really rebuild in place, so put the addition on. There was no real available land at the time. I was on the subcommittee about alternative sites, and with the purchase of land being at kind of the high end of the market, if you would, and no real land available. It's unfortunate, but it seems like there was just two alternatives in this one. Although it seems familiar to what you saw, it still seems to be the best alternative, again, given the others.
Very good. All right, so we'll start with Evan, who had his hand up.
So I appreciate the work that all of the the reassessment committee has done, and I know Chief Scory and your team and Steve and everybody who's been involved in this since sort of day one of the reassessment effort, so to speak. And I mean dating back before it was on the ballot when you first formulated that proposal. I appreciate the work here. I have no reason to question that you guys haven't found the most cost-effective option to achieve the objective you're trying to achieve in an expansion effort. Clearly, it's the cheapest option. It makes the most sense. I want to, if we could, and forgive me if I'm forcing anyone to be redundant, I want to take a dive. I speak here almost more as a layman voter than anything else. If we could take a few minutes to help at least me understand like the real need and the essence of the need to do this project. I'm sure you've said it a million times, Chief. But if you could just amuse me for a moment here, like, can you put into a nutshell, what are the critical reasons you need this project? What are the critical flaws in the current structure that prevent you from providing adequate police services to the town of Wakefield? Because frankly, Chief, these are the questions I would ask if I were, Steve Mayo and you were in my office bringing this to me for the first time. These are the questions I would ask you. Like, tell me why you really need it. What about the current structure hinders you from doing the job you're trying to do as a police chief?
Well, let's start with the lobby. The lobby's been an issue since day one, since we moved back into that building. The plan originally was to have an officer in what we'll call a box to help people who come into the lobby, and to have records down there and then dispatch on the second floor. That was a failure from the beginning. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to have an officer just sitting in the lobby waiting to help people who walk through the door. So having records in the lobby is helpful when somebody wants to report, but they're only there Monday to Friday during business hours. We're a police station. We're open 24/7. There should always be somebody in the lobby. Almost every police station you walk into, when you walk in, you see dispatch, because dispatch is always has personnel. That's where dispatch needs to be. It needs to be in the lobby. And the lobby needs to be an area that when somebody goes in, they can get whatever they want. They can talk to a dispatcher, they can talk to a police officer, they can talk to records during business hours during the week to get a report if they need it. We have a lot of custody exchanges that happen in the lobby. There's nobody there to assist in these custody exchanges. It's so bad. The officers who are on the second floor in dispatch, they can't leave. They man the radio, the phones, 911. They can't just get up and run downstairs if there's an issue in the lobby. So somebody needs to be in the lobby. The sensible thing is to move dispatch down there. But if you're going to move dispatch, you need everything to be there. You need records there as well. This place room you can go into. If it's a domestic situation, somebody can get away from the other party. So the lobby is seriously flawed. You go in there now, there's signs everywhere saying, pick up the phone. Nobody can find the phone. There's signs everywhere that say, take a right to go to the fire department. People still go to the records window to ask where they go for the fire department. There's so much wayfinding in there, it looks like a street with too many signs. It doesn't work. We'll move on to social services. So when that building was done in 2004, we didn't have a mental health clinician. We didn't have a family services officer. We didn't have 3 school resource officers. We didn't have a canine officer. We didn't have any social services at all. There was no recovery coach. We have all those things now. So as you could see from the slide presentation, we had to make office space. We converted closets into offices. They're busting at the seams. Those aren't really spaces that people should be working out of. They're probably not even healthy to be working out of because there's no heat, there's no air conditioning, there's no windows, there's no free flow of air. At some point, when things go wrong in society, that work gets dumped on the police department. If you had told me in 2004 that we would have a mental health clinician and a recovery coach, I never believed you, but we do. And as more problems in society pop up, we're gonna have to meet those needs. And that's probably gonna be met through more officers and more civilian personnel. At this point, we're maxed out. There's nowhere to put anybody. And it doesn't help us to have these people working off-site. It doesn't help us to have them working at town hall. They need to be war officers. They need to be in the building. They need to be communicating with the people that they work with. So we're maxed out on space for social services. Flow of the building does not work. Like I described before, with evidence on the 3rd floor, records on the 1st floor, it doesn't work. The evidence room itself is maxed out. There's no space left. And just because a case of court is disposed of doesn't mean that we can get rid of the evidence. We have to keep that evidence for 15 to 20 years until any appeals are done. So we're maxed out on evidence space, and we can't put that off-site either because that needs to be secure. The free flow of the building just doesn't work. It's the locker space is pretty much tapped out. The way the officers are configured on the same floor as dispatch, the administrative officers should not be in the same floor as dispatch. There's a lot of sensitive conversations that take place amongst the command staff, and with dispatch being right across the hallway, that pretty much becomes impossible. Deputy Chief Kelly, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered most of it, Chief. It was undersized from the day we moved in, and all the people that were working there knew it. I don't think it's. I think the building committee gets some blame for that, and I don't think it's all that just. I think they weren't. I think the town had been willing to spend a little more money back then to do the project right. We wouldn't be here today, but unfortunately. They did the best with what they had, and that's why we have to come back. So, but there's it's a lot about space is our biggest problem. And if you look at the square footage of some smaller departments, I think it all makes sense.
Evan, does that answer your question?
I think it was very helpful, Chief. So I'm hearing a lot about space. Really, is almost the core concern. You get into the details of flow and stuff like that, but ultimately you're talking about busting at the seams in terms of capacity, like physical capacity, right?
That's where we're at.
Okay, that's a really solid reason to do this project. And I hear you when you say in 2004, I bet you your call volume might have been half of what it is today. And because it's largely a culture thing where I think everything probably always went to the police, but so much more is going to the police now, right? Because you talk about the social services stuff. I hear that. I've seen it. I believe you on that. This probably predates you, Chief, and I think it predates you, Mr. Mayo. But I would ask almost a larger question. If we were undersized from the day we moved in, like the lieutenant just told us, why? And that's part one. And part two is I thought I remembered hearing a lot when this was on the ballot initially about structural issues, that the project wasn't built the right way the first time. The vibe I got was basically the contractor didn't do a very good job. Okay, none of us might be able to do. Well, first of all, can you tell me if that's true? That might be a misconception of mine, but that was one thing I thought I understood about the project. And if that's true, what you're going to need to do here, to be frank, is convince the voters that it's not going to happen again. That the new contractor, the new part of the structure, it's not going to be built poorly, and it's going to last more than 15 years. So were there any can we address the issues of the past? And not that anybody's responsible for them, but can we take a look at, can somebody explain, because I'm sure you've done it, you know, how you've evaluated the faults of that process 15, 20 years ago, and how you can assure sort of the public that it's not going to happen again.
Joe, you want to tackle that one?
Oh, thanks a lot, Dan. So, you know, throw it all on me. What you have to understand is this building and the expansion of the work that was done in 2004, that was finished in 2004, which was designed around 2000, had nothing to do with the police station. It had to do with the fire station. The police station was very, very little, if anything, was added to it because the needs were so great at the time with the fire station, where the floor of the old fire station was falling through, which would not be a good thing. And not only that, the height of the bays were not appropriate for modern fire trucks. There were enormous issues with the fire station. I would say that of the money that was spent in 2000, and that was when the building was finished in 2004, 80 to 90% of it was on the fire department. Very little on the police. So you have to understand that. People don't understand that. You have to remember we had zero money back then, to be honest with you. The debt service fund had recently been created, and only because of that were we able to do anything. But we had to be prudent in what we were able to do, and then not build, you know, the Taj Mahal, but have to build something that was functional for the fire department. We obviously did put in some addition in there because at the time, the police chief wanted to have the number of cells that were asked for. What we did is provided what the police asked for. With the dispatch being on the second floor back in 2000, that was what was done then. Boston and other places everywhere said you put the dispatch separated all by itself so that nobody can bother it, so that you get a good and correct dispatch work done. Plus, at the time, the Board of Selectmen were looking to add civilian dispatchers. That never occurred. And the civilian dispatchers would have allowed other officers to be elsewhere. As Chief Scory mentioned, there was a room down there for an officer of the day. There would be more officers available. That did not occur. So that therefore it was, that's why we have what we had. And they had to deal with what they had as best they could.
All right, thank you, Joe. And that's my recollection of what was going on too. I don't know if Steve has anything to add to that.
Yeah, a little bit before my time, but I also think that, you know, I can speak to where we are today. Let me do it this way. Public construction is a little bit different today. Any building worth or costing more than $500,000, I believe that's a number, we need to hire an owner's project manager. So we're having a professional that is overseeing the project, not a clerk of the works that is a great citizen that's giving up their time. These are people that do that. And I think that the community should judge us on the Galvin, on how that came out, shepherded through the Permanent Building Committee on time, under budget. Walton School, another item in recent history. So I think we have a great track record there on those two items. Another thing that I recall is that the way this was built before, and basically all they did was maybe put up some sheetrock on the police side. You know, I'm exaggerating, that's basically what it was.
That's
and
correct.
Not only that, but they dumped a lot of the mechanicals over there. So the police actually ended up losing some police because a lot of the mechanicals were over there. So I think it was, and my final point is that policing was very different then. I always felt that the police chief at that time was probably ready for the invasion, but really wasn't ready for community policing. And that's very different today with the mental health calls we're getting. And if you haven't watched some of the videos that have been shot on this, I think they're very enlightening. And you see Joey Garish, great woman, and I think she's with Wave, if I'm not mistaken, Joanne, talks about how you will have a domestic situation that spills over into the lobby, or someone who's fearing for their life, and their attacker is in just a doorway away. There's no privacy to talk about this. There's no ability to do that. So really, for where policing is going, this is vital for us to move forward. So
Thanks,
hopefully
everybody.
that answers your question, Evan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. One thought I just had while the chief was going through his explanation is something they call a 30-second elevator pitch. And one of the things that we might work on, all of us, is if we're cornered on the street or encounter somebody or get an email for somebody, to have this, no, it won't be a 30 seconds, but something like 4 or 5 main bullet points that you can regurgitate quickly as to why we need to do this. And maybe we can work on some kind of a summary like that. So we have a 1-minute dissertation on, why we need this. Something to think about. Next person up. Welcome, Gerard, for the meeting.
Sorry,
You're on.
Sorry for being late. The dance studio of Wakefield has been prolific in its off Main Street productions via Zoom, so I had to get them set up.
This is coming from Maine.
Sorry. First, Evan, thank you for making my question seem short. Very much appreciated. Chief, I am putting myself in the voter's shoes, as Evan kind of just did. So I'm going to ask, at risk, a really detailed question. And you kind of addressed it when you just mentioned the requirement to keep evidence for a long time. So my very weed type question is on that point about I believe it was a property recovery room. Is the material in there personal items, civil asset forfeiture kind of things, or things you have to return to the public at some point? Is that why, a certain heightened level of cleanliness is required for those kinds of items? If I know it's a real weedy kind of question, but if you just give me some color, because I would like to be able to, as Dan mentioned, be able to address all those nuances if approached on the street, so to speak, or at town meeting, because I'm still for this project. I was last time around, still disappointed it didn't go through. So I want to bulletproof the argument as well. So if you'll tolerate the detailed question, thank you.
We use that room for a number of things. Sometimes we have to take evidence that won't fit into the evidence room itself, larger items. For instance, we've had larcenies from the light department in the past of spools of wire. Won't fit in the evidence room, so we'll put it out there. Bicycles. We are responsible for safekeeping people's property. Any that's left abandoned, we'll safekeep for a while, maybe a year or so until somebody claims it. And we do have some of our own equipment out there, things that come out of cruisers that we can't put anywhere else. There's extra light bars out there. We have our cruisers built. They take the rear seats out of the cruisers, and we have to wrap them in plastic to put them in that storage area, because otherwise they're ruined. When we trade the cars in and we sell, they have to have the back seats. So we have our own equipment out there. We safekeep other people's property out there. And of course, when we give it back, it has to be in good shape. We can't let it get ruined out where it is. And it's for evidence that is just too large up in the evidence room.
Many thanks. That's all I got, Dan.
All right, thank you, Gerard. Stefan, you're up next.
Hey, everybody. One of the questions that I had was I was looking at the first floor plans, and it appeared as though the entrance was moving over into the fire side of the building. And I was just curious if any of the fire department's portion of the building is being cannibalized by these plans.
Who wants it?
I can try to answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
They actually, I believe they lose a small amount of space, but it actually becomes more user-friendly for their administrative personnel as also. The fire prevention officer, his office is located right there, and he is the officer that issues the burner permits, smoke alarm permits, and then the chief secretary, her office is all. So when you look at the overall flow of, even though they might lose a little bit of space, it actually is more user-friendly for both fire and police.
And it doesn't give them a crunch, these plans?
No, the fire chief was on board with this. He was a part of the process and he was fine with it.
All set,
Thank
Seth?
you. Yep.
All right, Dennis, you're up.
My only question is, when we go to up to 60 personnel, I don't hear anything about your parking structure. When I started, you only had about 6 cruisers. Now you have up over 20 odd. Are you running out of garage space?
The garage space is maxed out. You know, when you look at the adding personnel, of course, they're not going to be in at one time. They're going to be spread over 3 shifts over 7 days a week. So we can probably still work with the cars we have. If we have to add 1 or 2, find a spot out front to park one during a shift.
I'd like to add as well on that, if I may, Dan.
Go ahead, Joe.
We looked at the possibility of, we asked HKT what was the possibility of removing the columns that are in the parking area, and thereby allowing for more parking down there. Unfortunately, if we would remove the columns, the cost of putting the steel girders in there was quite high, and because you do have to have those columns, otherwise the floor of the fire station would come down again like it was supposed to back in, like it was going to back in the 90s and 80s. So we looked at that, and it was really just prohibitive cost.
Okay. Dennis, you good?
Yep.
All right, thanks. So, Jim, you're up.
Yeah, I guess my only point is, you know, being involved. I wasn't at every meeting, but I was involved through the process, and I'm a little concerned, you know, that we're bringing back a similar message as I think, you know, Evan tried to articulate. But I think if we get you know, we have a lot of things on the communication side that are out there that people did a good job with. They're on the website, but I think, you know, the elevator message, the 4 or 5 bullets, you know, on the keys, you know, for us involved when we go to vote on it, and others when asked, I think will be very helpful. I think it was a great suggestion, Dan, and that's all.
Thanks. So, taking off on that, one of the things I'm wondering if anybody in the committee can address is, there was 3 or 4 people that really led the charge 3 years ago to kill it. Have they been spoken to individually? Have they been brought into the process in some fashion? Are they on board?
I can answer that. One of them was actually on the committee, was put
Okay.
on the committee, and that person abstained from the vote on whether to go forward. That's in the minutes. Have they been brought on board? I would say no. But they've been in the beginning, in the whole thing in the beginning. Maybe Joe or Joanne or Jim has a different take on it, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I you know, from the meetings that I held, I mean, he was there, he attended the meetings, but I don't think he was ever, as I said, he abstained from the vote. I think he abstained from the meeting, even though he was physically present.
What about the others that were objecting?
Maybe a couple of times came into participation, but I have not heard anything.
Okay, good. Thanks. I had another question, and I'm going to do the share screen here. Let's see if I can make this work. And it had to do with a question regarding the layout on the first and second floor. I imagine this is very preliminary drawings, but something just jumped out at me on the, there we go. So if I'm looking at you guys can see my cursor, I hope.
Yes, we
There's
can.
a doorway into the back area. And I noticed that when you go in here, you either have to go down the stairs, up the stairs, or you have to back the elevator. So how do you get from the lobby area into the office area?
into, there's a doorway when you're talking into records?
Well, there's a doorway into, this is the firearms. There's the interview room. There's records. But if you're here, anywhere in the lobby, how do you get to the north end of the building?
Down the stairs that go down.
Go down, yeah.
I think,
say-
but they're like half floors or something. Does somebody
Yeah.
want to
Right.
explain that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a half floor. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it always, due to the elevations of that building, when we redid it, and there was a half floor involved, which it does get a little confusing if you're not used to it, but that's the way it is, just because of the elevation of the land.
Got it. Well, I've never been back there. I cut
But we can
myself
make
fortunate.
arrangements to have you arrested, Dan. Chief, you want to do that?
No.
I'm gonna wait till after the vote.
Yeah.
All right. I'll hold you to that.
All right. Okay. Well, that explains also the second floor, because I noticed the same kind of weirdness going on. I'm going,
Yep.
how do you get from here to there? But it's, what do they call it, a split cape or something like that kind of a design?
Yeah, so Dan,
Raised ranch.
the new
Raised ranch.
structure was, the new structure was built a half floor off from the old structure.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. All right. Now I'm looking for any other hands. Anybody else?
Hey, Dan.
You.
Bill Boudry, how are you?
Hey, Bill. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. I've been here.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Sure. I've been to the.
Oh, no, it's, I'm sorry, it's Doug that's been, so you didn't raise your hand. So Doug is the one that's missing.
I figured I'd rather just yell at you.
I'm going to mute you.
So, Chief, I have a question as relates to all the positives that you and others have pointed out, and this kind of picks up on my friend Evan Kennedy's questions overall about what will people think about this. Are there any negatives? Are there any negatives of anything you would say, or any of the members of your police force might be going around possibly saying to people, yeah, this is great, but are there any buts?
Well, I think anybody would like to have a new building from scratch. If you could sit down and build your ideal building, that would be the best way to do it. But it's not a feasible option for us. And that's the only thing I could see somebody saying is, we're putting an addition on the front and an addition on the back. Somebody might think it's piecemeal, but it works for us. It's going to do the trick, and that's what we need.
And again, I kind of touched on that somebody would ask in 5 years, is this going to be an inadequate facility? I mean, these are things that people are bound to ask. So,
And I don't think it is. I think when we look at the space that we've identified for future growth, it certainly it allows us, that quote from 1949 that said this building will be good for the next 20 to 25 years. I would say this building would be good for the next 60 years.
I think the perception that people have is that a new public safety building was done, not a new fire department.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So I think, that's, in terms of thinking about elevator speeds or whatever, that's something that really needs to be emphasized. Frankly, for me, the pictures are pretty powerful. They're pretty powerful of inadequate, inappropriate use of space. And I really think that's a point of emphasis. It was not a new safety building, it was a new fire department building. So.
Correct.
Thank you, Bill. Steve, you got your hand up?
I do. Thank you. I would just say that if you haven't gone on the town's website and taken a look at some of the videos that have been done, you should do so. That's going to help you with your 30-second elevator speech. There's also some facts there as well, questions and facts. And I really think you should look at those. I think that the Communications Committee did an absolutely fabulous job with those short little vignettes. And they're real people doing it. It's not, it's not the town administrator. It's not a town councilor. These are people that, the Eldridges, Amy Wall. These are people that are, Joey Garish. These are people that kind of are just people on the street. So really look at it, and then maybe tell me that what else we can do, because I'd love to see. We'd love that feedback.
Steve, when you did this
Thank-
last time for the presentation, I don't recall, was there any video of the existing structure as part of the presentation? Was
No.
it PowerPoint and words, or was there any video?
PowerPoint and words.
There's PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, I think some video would help.
Yeah.
Video or pictures again. I think some of the pictures we're seeing, you know, are powerful. Just a suggestion.
You all set, Bill?
Yeah, thanks.
All right, Don, you're up.
Yeah, so, you know, I remember last year at the town meeting, I thought that the presentation at the town meeting last year was compelling in terms of the need to really provide a space for, you know, sort of the key professionals in the community. And I think if my memory serves correct, that anybody who saw that presentation, or most of the folks who saw that presentation, because I think it passed with a supermajority at the town meeting, was supportive of the effort. So I think some of the things that Joanne mentioned in terms of communication and those types of things are really the key here, because I think if people sit down and they go through the information, that it's really clear what the need is, and that, you know, that this is as viable a solution as the town can get for what they're trying to achieve. So, I really think, you know, at the town meeting, I was just shocked last year, being new to the community, that something that could pass so overwhelmingly at town meeting could very shortly after that be defeated in the vote. And you know, I think it was a lot of misinformation that was produced after the town meeting that caused that to occur. So
Dan, you have to remember.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, after the town meeting vote, and once there was an election, we were prohibited from making any campaign pitch or whatever by law, by mass law. So therefore, all of those quotes and misinterpretations were essentially left unrebutted because we couldn't do so. And that was, I think, one of the biggest problems that we ran into.
So up until town meeting vote, we can go ahead and do all kinds of ads and so forth?
Correct. You can do anything you want up to the town meeting, essentially. But once that became a vote, and the Attorney General slapped the police department on the wrist because of their website, they had police support the police station. Once you had a vote, you were not allowed to do any type of campaigning. The town officials couldn't. If there was a separate body like Galvin had, where it had the galvanized people, that's a different story. Citizens could do it, but not the town officials, not the permanent building committee, not the police department.
FinCom?
Not the FinCom.
All right, thank you, Joe.
But that's if there's a vote, not town meeting. Don't worry about that.
Right, no, I got it. Okay, Don's all set. Pete, you're up.
Yeah, Chief, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm making an assumption that there is a direct correlation between the improvements in the physical facilities and resources that you have in relation to your ability to recruit, develop, and retain top talent and maintain a high level of morale, and therefore position yourself to have your staff and your officers deliver high quality service. That's an assumption I'm making. And
100%.
if you agree with that, I think that is a key story to tell as far as the elevator pitch that we're talking about, the communications that we have. I think everything you've said, is 100% accurate. I was a proponent of this a couple of years ago, very strong proponent, very upset when it didn't get passed. And I think that really strikes a chord with the voters. It's a subjective sense. It's not a factor, rather. It's not something that can be quantified easily. But if you can, if you feel that is the case, which I assume is totally reasonable, I think that is something that we should be able to have top on our list as far as our communication.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Good one, Pete. That's excellent.
The other thing, just quickly, Dan, I just want to say that I still have on my cell phone the recording from the illegal robocall that was made on June 23rd of 2018 from that group that really led the charge to shoot this down a couple of years ago. And I just think we have to be leery that we can't take anything for granted, and they'll go, pretty much do whatever they have to do to fight this. And some of it is very valid, but I don't know. I know that Joe Bertrand and Steve Mayo were aware of the robocall, and we had a discussion with Town Council Mullen with Peter May as to whether this was something that we should bring forward, that there was this illegal protocol, this illegal robocall that they made. They didn't follow the guidelines that are required, but we felt the same at that time. Don't bother, I mean, it's just not worth it. But I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, thank you, Pete. Evan, you're up.
Two things real quick. Number one, Joe, thanks for giving me a history lesson on the initial public safety project here. I as somebody who theoretically is a pretty informed voter, I had no idea that most recent project was almost exclusively fire department specific. So that was news to me, and I'm on the finance committee. So I think that says a lot about the difference that can be made this time around, especially with a cheaper option. But the other thing is, and I don't want to get into this too much, but I highly doubt the Attorney General said you're not allowed to advocate for a particular position on a proposed ballot question, regardless of what it is. There are careful rules you need to follow. You can't, for example, say, I'm Joe Bertrand, I'm a member of the appointed Finance Committee, I'm a member of the Permanent Building Committee, and I urge you to support this project. You just have to be Joe Bertrand citizen on any campaign literature or whatever.
No, this was the police department, Evan, that had it on their website. That's what happened.
Yeah, right. And that's why the Attorney General said, that's a problem. But it shouldn't scare the rest of you away from advocating for the project. You just can't invoke your titles. And if you're the police department, it gets more complicated, where your political stance affects your possibly your direct financial interest, because it impacts your work environment and whatever else. But it's not, all of us, we can speak to a project before town meeting and after town meeting if it ends up in a ballot question. You just have to be careful about invoking your public position in doing so. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Steve, you got your hand up?
Yeah, something very, very quickly. A great point by Pete McManama on this. And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the police department goes for its accreditation or reaccreditation, one of the issues that they sometimes tag us on is condition of the building. I believe you guys have told me that.
Yeah, I'm going to let Deputy Calabrese answer that. He's been more involved with the accreditation process.
And my point is that is a recruiting tool, that we're accredited department and everything else. So maybe Cal can jump in on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've fortunately we've passed on the things that we need to pass on, but they've always cited suggestions to improve, and usually the lobby is
Yeah.
Usually the lobby is one of them. The fact that we also have our evidence up on the top floor, and where we write our reports is on the bottom floor. So, continuity of evidence is, you want to streamline that so you don't have any defense attorney saying, so you went from here to here and then here to here and then here to here. So that's something that would be corrected in this building, in this new building project. It's, it's satisfactory, but it's not best practice. So that's how we get, through certification, but there's better ways to do it.
Thank you.
That's something to add to our bullet list.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? I don't see any more hands up, but I give people an opportunity just to speak up. And it looks like everybody's good. So, Chief?
I have one question,
Oh,
Dan.
go ahead.
Sorry. Chief, a couple of years ago, I seem to recall that there was a question of the way that the cells were designed, in that there was like access to the smoke alarms or something like that in the cells, and that was an issue. Has that been resolved?
It has been resolved. So what happened in the past is the only way I could describe them is they were normal type water sprinklers. So on occasion, we'd have a prisoner acting up who would leap from the bench and dislodge the fire extinguisher, which would set it off and basically fill up the cell block with water. So after that happening a couple of times, we did have somebody come in and re-engineer that so that doesn't happen anymore.
Terrific. Thank you.
Craig, you got your hand up? Go ahead.
I think that might have been a mistake, but I would just add one thing to some of the questions that people had. One of the questions is going to be, why are you coming back with the same proposal? And I think the key part of that is we're working with the same plot of land. Now, the land hasn't changed. So, and for some people who weren't on the committee and don't know, it's not structurally, the architects did load-bearing tests. We can't go up. So the only option is to go out, and that's forward, which is where all that wasted grassy area is in front of our building, to go out and match the fire department. So when people ask, why are you coming back with the same thing? It's because we can come back in 5 years, 10 years, unless we go build an off-site building for, whatever it is, $25 million. There's just nowhere else to go on that plot. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. But that raises one question. Aren't there some improvements over this plan versus the one from 3 years ago?
Yes, I just mean in terms of, I said the same. It's similar. It's not, we didn't come up with some new design to go up and out and sideways and back. It's basically bumping it out. We've just identified some rooms that we can kind of repurpose for future. That'll give us a design that will give a better flow for future space. Does that sound right, Chief?
It's more efficient. I think when the plans were made before, it looked as if everything was already occupied. And I think that generated a lot of questions about, well, so we're going to invest in a building that you've already outgrown. And some of that space was just described wrong. And so it's our subcommittee sat down and identified how we can grow into that space.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Because somebody's going to ask, well, wait a second, this is 9.6 million. 3 years ago, I don't remember the number, it was 8 million or something like that. Let's just use that as arguments. So if we're spending 1.6 million more, I understand cost increases and inflation, but we ought to be able to say, well, that older plan, the 3-year-old plan, has issues have come up and we've addressed them, and therefore part of the 1.6 million, I'm just picking a number, is improvements over the 2017 plan. So we need to understand, or at least be able to communicate to the public, why the extra $1.5 million or whatever it is, and these are the improvements besides the inflation.
There's been some additional HVAC issues that were not there 2 years ago that we're going to, that was all part of some of the cost estimates that were done. So that added money to it. I think it was the chief of Amar, was the boilers, is that right?
It's the boilers.
Yep.
There was some air conditioning, heating issues. And there was also some issues with the windows.
Okay.
So are
yes.
you guys saying that fundamentally it's the same, essentially the same setup with the changes that you mentioned? There's no like extra room that we found that we couldn't find before, that sort of thing?
No, we just reconfigured the rooms. The exterior building is still the same, but we reconfigured some of the interior ones to show that where we, as the chief said, that where we're going to have some future room for growth.
Growth. Perfect. Okay.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Don, your hand's up. Go ahead, Don.
Do the mechanical improvements also benefit the fire department as well?
They do.
The
because
HVAC and all of that also benefits the fire department as well, correct?
Correct. All the mechanical functions on the police side of the building feed into the, they have no mechanical equipment on their side of the building whatsoever. It all comes from our side of the building.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody else good? Craig, your hand's up, but do you have something to add?
Yeah, just one sec. I want to clarify. When I said coming back with the same plan, I should have said the same size. We haven't increased the square footage, but we have reconfigured things to make it better. That's what I should have said.
Okay, beautiful. Good. Thank you for that. Dennis, your hand's up.
Yeah, as far as the so-called future space, that's going to be built up as a permanent space, not just shell space. So it's not just going to be bare walls inside, no HVAC or anything. It just won't have a desk in it or whatever, right?
I think we said we're going to set it up as an office. Is that what I understood?
Yes.
Yeah, like if it's identified as space, you set an office.
Is the space that you have for future detectives, future officer, going to be fitted out as a finished room, or it's going to be a shell space room to be built out eventually when you need it?
Well, I think with some of that space, we will, for instance, the 2 stations in the detective's office. Those will be for future detectives. But when you look at on the 3rd floor, there's 3 rooms that are identified as future office, or they could be storage. We'll build those out as we need them. That makes more sense.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? All right, I think we're good there. Chief and Deputy Chief, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think everybody's on board with this project. Now we just have to sell it.
We appreciate your support.
Thanks for having us tonight and hearing us out.
No problem. All right, if we're ready to move on, we have supplemental appropriations is the next article. And Steve or Kevin, you guys want to tackle that one?
Kevin, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can do that. This article here, it's basically a placeholder. Currently, we have a $300,000 reserve fund. And looking at where we are right now, there's a couple big ticket items that are potentially out there. So we're putting this as a placeholder on the town meeting warrant in case we need to do a supplemental appropriation, similar to what we did last year for legal fees for the a lawsuit that we have against us for some contamination, and also for the fire salaries, where we may be able to cover both of those currently under the reserve fund, but as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll have a better idea. So we put this in and on the warrant as a placeholder.
Okay, thank you. Anybody questions? Any No hands are going up. Apparently, we're good with that. Since we're not spending any money now, there's not much to question. Next one is the Medicaid reimbursements. Who's going to tackle that one?
That's Kevin.
I'll take care of that one too. Medicaid reimbursement, we do this article every 3 or 4 years. We'll be looking for $10,000 from the free cash. The school department has special ed students that have some services that will be covered by Medicaid, but we need to submit the paperwork, and we use an outside vendor to do that for us. Over the past 3 years, this has brought in approximately $225,000 to the town's general fund. Over that time, we've paid out as an expense about $10,000. So it's a great bang for our buck. So we're looking to refund this, fund this article again in the amount of $10,000.
Thank you, Kevin. Questions from anybody? Not seeing any hands. Nobody speaking up. So I think we're good there. Next is committee comments. Anything out there? Maybe this is the opportunity to talk about the next meeting and the forecasting committee. Steve, you had an idea. We talked about it a little bit this afternoon. Why don't you go ahead?
All right, when as a way of background, Kevin and I have been talking a lot about this, and I've been talking a lot with our state delegation on what's going to happen for fiscal year 20 and what's going to happen for fiscal year 21. For fiscal year 20, so the year we're in now, as far as state aid is considered, the word is we should be okay and see no cuts on our state aid that's coming in this fiscal year. Now, I do preface that with the fact that there's always the option of a 9C cut from the governor, but what we're hearing is for this year, we should be okay. Now let's go to fiscal year 2021. I had a long conversation with Senator Lewis yesterday, and there really are three main considerations fiscal year 21. One is, of course, the decrease in revenue statewide. They're going to see a decrease in hotel tax, sales tax, casino tax, capital gains, meals tax across the state, not to mention regular income tax that's going to go down. So they're looking at a pretty serious decrease in revenue. The other consideration will be how much of the rainy day fund are they going to use to cover that, and what will the federal stimulus bill bring into the state? So they're kind of looking at those three buckets over there, what's going to happen. They will have a revenue hearing starting next week where they will have a consensus revenue. They'd already done this for fiscal year 21, and that's what they were basing some of their initial budget numbers on. So that's all thrown out the window. So they're going to be re-looking at that, and over the next couple of weeks, we should hear something from them, what their consensus revenue numbers are. So I asked the senator, I said, if you were me, what would you do? And I said, I'm going to start out considering going forward level funding state aid from fiscal year 20. We had a slight increase in Chapter 70 and a slight increase in unrestricted local aid. He thought that was a good place to start, but maybe you might want to also consider a reduction from fiscal year 20. So that was a little bit sobering. And he wasn't sure whether the legislature was going to do that or that it would come in a 9C cut. So what I'm thinking is I'm actually having a department head meeting tomorrow morning by Zoom where I'm going to challenge my department heads. And when we have a department meeting, I include the school, I include the MLD and what have you. I'm going to challenge them to relook at everything, or else I'll look at everything and see what we can do to trim across the board close to $1 million or more to try to get us into an area where we are not looking at a big deficit or a slight deficit or maybe a slight surplus. I've already identified a couple of areas in my mind. What I would like to do is thinking that maybe on the 9th we could have a meeting of the forecasting committee where I can share what we've talked about, what Kevin and I will have talked about, the department heads will have talked about, and how that's going to affect us going forward. So it's not a mystery. One thing I do look at is I don't want to see anybody lose their job that's working for us now. So we look at new positions or positions that haven't been filled for a while, and whether those should be, look pushed off for a year or so. We look at the capital to say, hey, can we trim a couple of things here, or let's approve half of the capital in May, and then maybe do the other half in November when we have a better picture. We talked about that, I think, in 2008 or 2009. Of course, we're only talking about probably total of $500,000 at that point. We'll also be looking at, do we need to be putting as much as we first indicated, our first forecast, putting into debt service? I think we can trim that a little bit without hurting anything. Do we look at paying out OPEB later in the year? I don't even want to consider that because I think that's a great hard spot to have in our budget, but it is something that when times get really bad, we can look at. So adjusting those expenditures and adjusting our aid and adjusting our local receipts are things we'll be looking at. But I will tell you, on the bright side, we're still bringing in a lot of building permit money, which is amazing to me. That probably $30,000, $40,000 this week in new permit fees, which is kind of crazy. So the only other thing I want to say is I think town meeting will be moved to early to mid-June. I know it will be moved to early to mid-June, which will give us actually a little more time to get some information from the state. However, I don't think the state will have a budget set until after July 1st. And that's it.
Thanks, Steve. So what we're thinking is, and I'm with Steve on this one, is for their next meeting, it would just be the forecasting committee a week from tonight. And then when we do our voting, we'll do it sometime probably in May. How much time do we need? What, 3 weeks, 2 weeks from our vote until we have the booklets put together for a town meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have the booklets. Actually, we're almost ready to go as far as the budget was concerned. Just needed to be checked, but there might be some changes there. But so yeah, that's I'm not all that worried about that. There is a charter provision that states that the finance committee needs to approve the budget by, I think it's 20 days before town meeting. So mid-May is probably a good spot.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking.
We'll be close enough.
Yeah, so if we have our vote meeting, let's say in late April or early May, that'll still give us plenty of time. But I'd like to do our vote meeting later so that we get more information and we can make a more intelligent decision. That's my thoughts. But I'll let anybody else chime in. Bill, your hand is up. You want to add to this discussion?
Well, I want to ask Steve a question. When you talk about Steve asking, meeting with the department heads and asking them to find money like that, is that something you do year over year, or is that?
Yeah, we look at every budget, every line, every way.
Okay, have you proposed to them a hard and fast number, so to speak, in the past, or is this a little different?
Usually we ask them to, I think, to start where they were last year, level fund a lot of things, and only fund for contractual is usually how we start with them, with the budget process. So this is a little bit different, and I'm thinking of some department heads that have come to me and said, I'd really like to have this new position here, and it probably was a good position to have, and in perfect times I could see the benefit of it, but that might have to wait a year. So that's kind of what we're going to ask them to do.
I asked that in terms of the earlier discussion with the police department. I heard a number of 60, which, was.
Oh, yeah. That's more that I'm kind of teasing the police chief on that. is that one of the criticisms of the one item that we didn't message well, I think when we first came out with the public safety building was, well, this isn't going to accommodate an increased force. No, it will. this plan will accommodate 60 police officers. We're not going to get there in a day or a year, but it's more about would the building accommodate an increase in staff.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill. Dennis, you're up.
How do we sit on our contracts now? Any movement?
Yeah, I will tell you that I have that amount worked into my forecast. I have tentative agreements with all three of the unions, with in kind of in the areas where I've said to you, right where I said before, including anything that's added on, because it's not just the cost of living increases, which will be very consistent to what you've seen before. Minimal add-ons on the other area, and they're all going to come in at costing out for each fiscal year, 3.5 per fiscal year, going out the next 3.
How'd the school make out?
That I can't tell you.
You all set, Dennis?
Yep.
Jim?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just after the meeting with forecasting and department heads, at some point, you can just give us some feedback, whether it's an update or just some of the essence. Is that something you could share with us, between meetings?
Oh yeah. I will. What I'll do is I'll present. I've already mentioned this to my council. They'll be getting. They'll have to vote on an updated budget, on changes, and then that will go to the finance committee for recommendation. So absolutely. What I plan to do is there was another question about all of the how all the bonding works in. We do have a schedule from bond council, which I'll make sure Dan gets so everyone can see that and play with it. It's about, I know you guys like these things, so this is like a lot of pages. You guys will have some fun with this.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay. All right. So any other questions? Anything else from other subcommittees? Anything new? Report? I would doubt it. Let's see. Unless anybody has anything else, I think we're ready to end this meeting.
I move adjournment, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
That was Gerard.
Indeed.
And a second?
I second.
Joanne?
Or Jan, either one.
All right. All in favor, turn off your monitor.
Stay well.
Hey, guys.
Thank you for doing this. Great job.
Be good.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Good night.
Good night.